Hello guys, welcome back. Today we're going to be previewing the round 1 matchup between the Edmonton Oilers and the LA Kings. A series that, trust me, I have a lot of thoughts on, but this is a round 1 matchup that in my opinion has a lot more than meets the eye and could be a lot closer than we expect. But at the same time, how do these two teams stack up against each other, and which team do I think will win this series? Edmonton or the Kings? Watch till the end for the full predictions and make sure you hit that subscribe button to the Sportsnet YouTube channel for the best sports coverage around. And without further ado, let's get straight into the wackiness that will be this round 1 matchup. Now, if you asked me a couple days ago, or even before I did my research, I would have said the Oilers were the easy favorite in this series and might win this series in 4 or 5 games. But the more I look at this matchup, the more I look at both teams right now, I feel like LA is going to be a very strong opponent for the Oilers to have to face. And although I don't think LA is the favorite by any means, still, I think this is a Kings team that can provide some really great effort and keep this series close. I definitely don't think the Oilers are sweeping by any means, and I think the LA Kings could probably steal a couple in this series. Now, one of the most interesting parts about both the Kings and the Oilers to me is just how much adversity they faced throughout this year. For the Oilers, it was obvious. In the first month of the season, they were among the NHL's elites and riding high, but as the season started to go on, the success started to evaporate for the Edmonton Oilers, and they were quickly forced to fire head coach Dave Tippett. Fortunately for them, under them in the Bakersfield Condors, they had an amazing coach in Jay Woodcroft, and since he was promoted on February 10th, the Oilers are 24-9-3 and went from 5th place to 2nd place in the entire Pacific. Now, as for the LA Kings, they've also dealt with a lot. Although they've been in the playoff race in the 3rd spot around that range for pretty much the entire season, their defense has always been in question and has always been moving. Alex Edler has missed quite a bit of time. Early on in the season, you had their top 4 D-men and Sean Walker have an ACL and MCL tear, and Drew Doughty played his final game of the season on March 7th and is out for the rest of the year, including the playoffs, with wrist surgery. So that defense especially has seen some massive changes, but due in large part to Todd McClellan's system and some solid goaltending as of late, the Kings have stayed in the playoff hunt and are 3rd in the Pacific. Now, the thing is, both the Oilers and the Kings have been quite solid, especially over these past couple weeks, with the Kings recently having a 5-game winning streak and looking very consistent. In terms of the actual point scorers, there's a big discrepancy. For the Edmonton Oilers, obviously their top scorer is Connor McDavid with 122 points, but you compare that to the LA Kings, where their top goal point getter is Anze Kopitar, who only has 66 points on the year, and that goes back to the goals scored for both teams and the goals against. For the goals scored per game, the Oilers are 7th in the entire NHL and the Kings are 20th. As for goals against per game, the Kings are much more efficient, being 9th in the NHL, top 10, and the Oilers being 17th. So obviously there's a lot more goal scoring going on with Edmonton, but for the LA Kings, their structure and their consistency has really been a huge part of that success, and also again points to some playoff success. In my opinion, for teams like LA that are more defensively structured, you're likely to see a little bit more success than teams like Edmonton. But at the same time, I think both of these teams are extremely evenly matched. Now, one important part of this series that I don't think is going to get talked about enough is the goaltending, with both Mike Smith and Donovan Quick being on the veteran side of goaltenders, to put it at the best. I mean, Mike Smith is in his 40s now, which is insane to think about. But both of these guys have history. If you remember back to the 2012 conference finals with Quick on LA and Mike Smith on the Phoenix Coyotes, LA got the advantage in that series and would later win the Stanley Cup. So there's some bad blood between the two, but both of them have been fantastic over these last couple weeks. When it comes to Jonathan Quick, overall in 46 games, he has a .910 save percentage and is also top 10 in goals saved above expected, really being great over these last few months. When it comes to Mike Smith, he's also been incredible. Over these last 8 games, he has a .963 save percentage and .800 record. So both of these guys have been at the top of their games, and even though they're on the older side, in my opinion, this series could be a lot more low scoring than people expect, mostly because of these two guys playing their hearts out and really playing like they're in their primes. And even though I've been talking about LA's strengths quite a bit in this video, at the same time, I think for the Edmonton Oilers, although no success in the first round is a given, especially over these past couple of years, at the same time, I think LA is going to be a strong, consistent test, especially defensively, for the Edmonton Oilers to go up against. But at the same time, I do favor Edmonton in this series, and I think as it goes on, as we start to get into Game 4, Game 5, Game 6, I think that's where Edmonton is going to start to separate themselves away from the LA Kings. I think it could maybe be 2-2 at some point, maybe at the same time, maybe it's 2-1 for the LA Kings, but I think it's at some point Edmonton is going to get further and further into the trenches and eventually dig themselves out and win this series. It'll be a tough one for sure. It's not going to be an easy one, especially physically, but at the same time, it'll be a strong, nice test for Edmonton to go on to the second round, maybe face the Calgary Flames and have an even bigger matchup there. So looking at the actual predictions themselves, looking at both teams at hand, I'm going to say the Edmonton Oilers win this series in 6. And although I don't think it's going to be an easy one by any means, I don't see Edmonton sweeping. I do still feel like Edmonton is eventually going to get past LA and move on to round 2. But that'll be it for today, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Let me know in the comments down below what you guys think about this series. What do you think will happen? Do you see Edmonton winning? Do you see LA winning? How many games do you see this series going as well? Who do you see being the leading scorers? And what is your bold prediction for this series too? Let me know all your thoughts down below. Subscribe, hit that like button, and hit that notification bell to Sportsnet for the best sports coverage around. Make sure you share this video with your friends too. Oilers fans, Kings fans, or any NHL fans you guys know out there. And I will see you guys in the next one. Have a fantastic day, and goodbye.